And we are live. Lisa Norris, calling all the way from Utah. Welcome to the Underground, home of the, how can I say it? Eccentrics? No, let's be nice. Let's say different people. Thanks for
Thank
coming
you.
on. Now, I'll just set this up for those who don't know, which I imagine will be 99.9%. We have come into contact. I found out you're a scientist. I was writing a lot of books that I needed some serious scientific knowledge, and I didn't have that. And especially on my most recent book, Silent Fear and Novel, which is, I collaborated with you for, it must have been, I don't know, over a year. And that was because it's set in the world of, how can you say it? It's about a quarantine that goes on, and it's due to a flu virus that is affecting the entire world and threatening humanity. And so that all sounds great when you set that up as a writer, but then suddenly it's like, oh my God, how the hell do you tell that? And one way we needed to tell that was to get the microbiology right. And it just so happens that that's not exactly your field of expertise, but very close, and you're often using microbiology, I imagine. And one of the things that during that whole research, at first it was annoyance, like you, as a storyteller, you really just want to tell the damn story, but you've got to do all this research and get it all exact. But gradually I became fascinated by, how there's this world below the surface, and it seems just as, if not more so, vibrant than ours. And I microbiology is now a real field that's I'm going to continue studying it, and I enjoy learning from you. And even though you were correcting me every damn second, but I really like finding out how the body actually consists of a micro world. So your term is a medical laboratory scientist, is that right?
Yes.
I got that right, yeah. And so can you explain, like, how do you, within that basic field, how do you use microbiology, and also how something like a pandemic, like the fictional scenario that set in this book, Silent Fear, how things like that can actually potentially threaten humanity's survival in the future?
Well, I worked at a clinic, and a part of working in a clinic, I had to work in microbiology department. And that's one way you get to know viruses and bacteria.
Right.
And so I forgot your question now.
I think I did a bit of a double header. Like, how did you? I'm good at that, but how did you get into? Like, how do you use microbiology within that field? Like, is it a daily thing that you're?
Yeah, like, so
Yeah.
you have people sick every day that come into the clinic, and you need to know how to treat them properly for whatever they have, because you have antibiotics of the yin yang. You need to make sure that the antibiotic that you're actually picking for your patients is actually going to kill the bacteria.
Right.
Viruses is a little different. We actually dealt more with bacteria than we did with viruses. Viruses was more in the like in the way of the flu, which was helpful for your book because you didn't deal with the other type of viruses that need more extensive testing. You just dealt with the rapid testing of the flu virus.
Yeah.
But people come in with respiratory illnesses all the time, and so they will culture that, like you explained in your book, how you swab the throat, and then we actually culture those on agar plates. There are many different kind of agar plates. They all have different ingredients in them.
Okay.
Because bacteria, they feed off certain different they react to different substances, like some maybe pH based, and others are maybe more blood-based. And so after incubation time, we can actually identify the bacteria and then extract the some colonies and find out which antimicrobial agents they're actually susceptible or resistant to, so they can be treated properly.
Right.
So that's what microbiology is. For me, working in the health sector.
Yeah. And I was amazed when you start to look at the real images, just how detailed they all are and how frightening some of one question I had was, why do they look like, some of the viruses and bugs and that down there look like the most hideous monsters you've ever seen, with claws and what do they have? Why do they have that look? Is that because they're threatening, or is that because
they're awesome? Those are proteins.
Oh, okay.
Claws. You can call them claws, I guess, but they're like antennas. It's what makes them so smart. It's what makes them, when they invade your body, they have all these horrible claws, I guess, but I think they are amazing proteins that trick our cells, and they latch onto them, and they're actually able to, because viruses, they have one goal, and that is to basically survive and be populated and kill everything else in their way. They're extremely selfish. They don't care about anything else.
Right.
And so they will trick our system into inviting them in, basically. And our immune system tries to fight them off, but that doesn't always work out. And so it takes over. So there are many different types of viruses and the way they enter our cells. The flu virus, like the one you had in your book, that one actually, our cells actually invites the entire virus into the cell, and then they replicate there, and the cell explodes, and you have a ton of different viruses, and they're just all there, like millions of viruses from one single cell.
Wow.
And so that's the flu virus, and that one is actually not as bad as the like the HIV virus, the retrovirus, because what they do, and they have an enzyme called reverse transcriptase in them, and what that does is the virus does not enter our cell. It stays on top. It uses that protein, those claws. So does the other virus, but anyway, so they actually inject a part of their genome. They have like RNA into our cell, and then they create DNA out of that, and then they insert that into our DNA. So now our cells are producing DNA that is embedded with viral DNA. So when that cell reproduces, it's reproducing a cell with viral code in it. And so you can actually carry that viral code into other generations as well, because it will last forever.
So that's why if a mother's got HIV, the child gets it?
Well, it's in her DNA.
Right.
It's embedded in her DNA. So whatever information that viral DNA has is now part of your DNA.
Okay. So is HIV the most complex virus, if you can call it that, in history that we've seen, that scientists have seen?
Well, the problem they're having with it is it keeps changing. It's mutating constantly. Not all viruses mutate as fast as the HIV virus. And so
then my question would be, if it's getting more complex, then why is it it's not the death sentence it used to be to become HIV positive? Why is that?
I honestly think it depends on who you talk to, because it's one of those questions where a lot of answers are both right and wrong, if you will.
Okay.
The immune system is so complex, and maybe I think in order to understand how these viruses survive and how we actually kill them off, you have to understand the way our body deals with the invader, the infection. Because if you just look at the virus itself, it's impossible to know how to get rid of it. You have to know how your blood cells, what your body's doing in order to fight it. And when you understand that, you can understand why it's difficult to manage it and why some are easier to manage. And with like I said, we have like our cells, like you're talking about how these viruses, they look so horrifyingly scary because they have all these things sticking out,
Yeah.
these proteins, and so our cells have them as well. And
so our good cells can look aggressive, sinister as well, even if they're on our side.
well, our cells are they're much different,
Right.
In shape. They don't look quite like that. Even under microscope, they don't have it doesn't look like that, but they do have communicators on them, and they're constantly adjusting to the environment and to recognize the invaders. And what the HIV virus is so good at is recognizing. So you get a treatment that adjusts your cells to kill off how the virus is in your body at this moment. Well, then the virus somehow realizes this and it changes its proteins, so it no longer can be recognized by your immune cells. So now you have to go and figure out, okay, what virus do we have in our body now? So it's always mutating like that. The receptors are changing. I don't know. I haven't looked at what it is today that they're doing to actually manage it so it doesn't reproduce as fast. So I don't really, I don't think I can answer that properly for you.
Okay, so some of what you're touching on there, I think, ties into cancer, which I want to come back to in a minute. But one of the things with our book, one of the things we had to do was create a situation where an isolation thriller could be possible, and that's quite hard in the modern era with technologies and all that. So one of the ways to cut off, to create that sort of thriller or horror where you've got no one to help you, was to create this pandemic. And at first I thought, well, is that really possible in the modern world? And then I came across, I think I'd come across it before I knew you, but you really enlightened me on the Spanish flu, which was in 1918 and killed about, I think estimates are 50 to 100 million worldwide and infected 500 million worldwide. And that was a big chunk of the world's population back then. And I think that's a really interesting one for anyone interested in, how flu viruses can spread, how large numbers can be infected really fast. That's a great historical event to study. Can you just what do you find interesting about the Spanish flu?
I think so the flu virus, it really doesn't survive long in the air. If you have the flu virus and you sneeze, you're going to have thousands of droplets coming out, and most of those droplets are going to be completely fine, just benign, nothing in them. And then you're going to have droplets that are filled with viruses and bacteria, and they will die unless they find a host. So their main objective is to find another body to occupy and take over. And during the time of the Spanish flu, you had all these young soldiers going to war. And so you have this territory that basically spreads all over Europe. I mean, that war was, a lot of people were involved in that war, put it that way. And if you think about the conditions they were in, it was the perfect conditions for the breeding of a viral population.
That's
You had
true.
them
Yeah,
in
you're right.
bunkers all crammed together, and so they were just having a big old party and spread all over the place.
Right. So it was a
So did
perfect
other diseases
situation.
too.
Yeah.
Right, and if you think about everything else that was going on, their immune system was completely shot.
Okay. Yeah. And so, but wow, 50 million people. And so, do you think the humanity was, as a species, was actually threatened at that moment? Could it have, like, why didn't it? Do you know why it didn't go further?
Well, immunity plays a big role in infection. Your body is automatically, it's designed to fight off invaders, just anything that's foreign.
Mm-hmm.
And the only time when you actually become sick is when the infection is greater than your immune system, and that has everything to do with your health, basically, and how strong your immune system is. And so a lot of people, and I think you also mentioned this in your book, that a lot of the older generations, they weren't infected because their immune system was most likely exposed to something very similar in
Oh,
the past.
that's right. I remember now that I remember reading that research that said that the Spanish flu would it have been a mutation of an earlier flu, like a more aggressive? Because is it true that all flu viruses are basically related?
Well, you have viruses that originate from swine, then you have some that originate from
Bird,
chicken,
bird and horse and that. Yeah.
right? So I don't know if they're all from the same, like, I don't know if they were all from the same source. I don't know where those all different animals, how that they would link together to one main virus from, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a correct statement that they're all from the same virus.
But no, I remember reading that the older generations, they would have been, let's say so it was 1918. Let's say there was
Right.
something similar, but a much lesser strain or less aggressive strain, say in the 1880s. So the older people would have been would have built. Most of them would have gotten that flu,
Mm-hmm.
and then when it came around again in 1918, the elderly were much better off, and
Right.
a small percentage of them died, but it was different than the young. So,
Right,
and,
because
and that was
when
really surprising because you'd think, someone who's uneducated like myself in science would think, well, the young would have better immune systems, but I wasn't thinking that you build up an immunity once you're exposed to something.
it's you have cells in your body called memory cells, and
Oh yeah.
so what happens is you have you heard of macrophages?
No.
Macrophages are your immune cells in your body. You should Google them. They are pretty amazing. They're like these badass defenders in your
Oh
body.
yeah. Yeah.
If you were gonna have, you know, a superhero fight, you would want to bring your macrophage with you.
Yeah.
It has but they kind of like perverts because they have like these like a ton of these octopus looking arms, and they're sticky. So what they do is they just touch everything because they have to make sure that you're, it's like they're patting you down, seeing if you're good to go. And if it recognizes you,
Wow.
it lets you go. But if it pats you down and is like, you don't belong in here, you're a virus or whatever, it actually it has this weapon. It's called oxidative burst, and what it is it releases superoxide and hydrogen peroxide. Those are free radicals, and it also has something called NADPH oxidase. So what it is basically like an electron particle beam. So it shoots a hole in the virus, and all the guts start leaking out.
Man,
and then it's pretty
it really
awesome.
is. It's
I
awesome.
know.
It's like, and when you mention superheroes, it really is like there's these battles going on inside your body that you
Right,
even inside
all
a
the
lazy
time.
even inside a lazy person, there's all this
Hmm.
activity going on. You know.
Right, and this is happening like in you right now. That's what's so awesome. Like you have
Right,
all
right.
these things going on at every moment, and then once it's actually punctured a hole in the cell,
Yeah.
in the virus, it has something called a phagolysosome. And it's kind of like a sac. So what it is if you were to see it on screen, you would kind of see the macrophage forming like a sac around the virus. And it
Okay.
just kind of grabs, and all of a sudden the virus is inside the macrophage. And
Wow.
once it's in there, it's like in its own little bubble,
Mm-hmm.
trapped where it can't go out. I mean, it's probably most likely it's dead because it's been punctured and the gut's been spilled out. But the macrophage is not taking any chances. So when it's in this phagolysosome, this sac,
Yeah.
it actually tears it up into components. So instead of having a cell, you now have you have amino acids, you have fatty acids, you have nucleic acid. And what it does, it spits it out into your body. And then your other cells, they pick up these little pieces and they use it to create new cells and healthy cells.
Healthy cells. Okay. Wow. Those
Right.
I want a
Great
team of
building blocks.
those macrophages on my team.
You
For sure.
do. They're doing
Yeah.
this right now. And a lot of these components are also, they have a lot of information about the virus.
Okay.
And so you have something called memory cells. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot more. I mean, I'm only explaining like one little part of what's going on. There's a lot of other things going on in the viral killing process.
Sure.
So you have cells that are memory cells that pick up information about this virus, and they're like, okay, we're going to keep this information, so if this cell or if this virus ever comes back, we
Wow.
will recognize it. And so
that's what when people say they've got an immunity to it, that's just lazy journalism for really saying that these macrophages or whatever good cells you've got down there working for you, or good fighters, should I say, in the micro world down there, they are storing memory of everything that ever happens to you in your gut or in your microbiology. You're that right?
right,
They never forget. Wow.
no, it's there for them to remember. And so once you're so that virus enters your body again, and that cells go, they're uh-oh, it's back, and they will actually send signals to your immune system to create cells to specifically designed to fight that virus. If that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they multiply with that in mind to fight that infection.
Oh, it's
So
amazing. I sort of think if only we could have some of this intelligence down there in our micro world, actually in our brains, like in our real world.
some people do, and that's just,
If you pick the dumbest person you know, you'd think, man, you got to swap that with your micro.
I know.
Now, what also fascinates me about you is you've come from you're a scientist. You've worked extensively in the medical field. That included hospitals as well, or just medical clinics?
No, I just worked for it's a family clinic.
Right. But so you've worked. I mean, people. I often think with nurses and that they often pick up. They're often so much more busy than doctors, and they see a lot more things. And I think that obviously doctors have the greater knowledge and so on. But I often think there's an analogy there with your work that nurses see things behind the scenes, they see more patients, all that. And I think with what you've seen a different side where you're dealing with doctors and they're calling you up saying what's going on in the lab with this patient. And you were telling me sometimes they even you were telling me via our correspondence that sometimes the doctors will even say, well, what do you advise? And that's scary to me because why is the doctor asking you that? Do you know what I mean?
Because they never took lab sciences.
Right.
There are different routes you can take to become a doctor. One of them is through the lab program.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are other ways as well. And if you don't take the laboratory-oriented route,
mm-hmm.
you're only going to have a class about it maybe, or maybe it's a chapter in one of your classes.
Oh my God.
They're only introduced to it. And
so
it's like that with
do you feel that those doctors who have qualified as a doctor but they haven't taken much in the lab field, do you feel that's a weakness there, or do they make up for it in other departments?
I think that's individually based. I think some doctors just seem to have really pick up on things. I noticed with most of them is they may not have, like, a patient will come in and they may not really know what's going on, so they will automatically run tests because they, just from the symptoms alone that the patient is showing physically and are telling the doctor about, they can't figure out what's wrong. So they're like, well, let's do some standard tests and see what's abnormal and then go from there. And so a lot of times there's so many unnecessary tests ran just because there are doctors that don't know what they're actually looking for. And then you have other doctors that are really good at picking up on small details, so they're able to instantly narrow the field and figure out what's going on faster, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, this sort of area fascinates me just as much as what we've been discussing so far, because we're getting into, on the one level, I think it's science, right? But then we're getting into humanitarian issues because medicine affects everyone. It's one of the most important things on the planet. And I'm really interested in, asking you some things that might be a bit off the wall, but, and most of them are probably just rumors and hearsay about the medical field. But at the same time, I think somebody's got to ask certain questions because we're getting, I don't know, we're getting less and less free medicine to people, and we're also, there's a lot of rumors about, for example, less and less people trust Big Pharma, all these things. So I wanted to, one in particular, and we touched on it, or we might have skirted around it before, was cancer. Now, in anything you've seen or thought about in the medical field, do you believe this theory that it's potentially possible that a cancer cure, and I'm aware that that's once again lazy journalism, because cancer cure, there is no one cancer, but just as a general subject, do you believe that a cancer cure, or cancer cures plural, could potentially be suppressed for financial reasons? For example, if it wasn't, if the cure wasn't patentable by Big Pharma, let's say it was something that everyone could pick up at their supermarket for $1, something like that, just some obscure thing, whether it was baking soda or bizarre stuff that you'd never think of, and they say, hey, this cures this. Do you feel that, have you seen anything that can indicate that those sort of conspiracy theories, there could be validity to them?
From experience, no, but from just doing my own personal research into the topic, there's definitely a lot of questions that you should raise. And I looked once on NIH, their website, because somebody had claimed that they spent $80 million on cancer research.
Okay.
And in my head at the time, that sounded like a lot of money, but it didn't really specify the time frame. And so I'm like, is it really spending that much money? Then why aren't we getting anywhere?
Yeah.
Because it seems like we get to a certain point and then it just stops. Like, oh yeah, now we know how to cut the cancer out, but we don't know how to keep it away. That's no idea. And so it's like, how can you spend that much money and not know? And so I looked on their website, and they have actually, it's like a table, and you can actually click on a Excel version of it if you want. But it's a table of all the breakdowns of their finances for research.
Yeah.
And it's like a long list of all the diseases, and cancer is one of them. And I found it funny because cancer was one, and then you had further down, you had lymphoma, but lymphoma is cancer. And so even though cancer was its own bracket, there were also individual cancers that had their own research money.
Okay.
But I looked only on the cancer rubric, and it said like 5,580. And I wasn't exactly sure what that meant, because in 2016, there's no way we just spent that, because it had like multiple, every column had its own year, and then it had 2016. And then I looked to see what those values meant, and it said all the values are shown in millions. And so $5,580 million, that's what, 5.6 trillion?
Billion, maybe? I'm not sure.
I don't know, what's 5,000 million?
I think it's 900 million is like 900 million, but once you go over that into the thousand, it becomes a billion. So that'd be five, but that's a shitload of money.
That's only in 2016.
Yeah, that'd be right. Yeah. So there's so much being spent, and so
right.
I mean, what can you give insights then on how laboratory research can be skewed and certain? What have you noticed there?
You and this is all of it comes down to money. And when you're reading about these things, you have to really take the word of the people that are involved, like whistleblowers and other people that feel like they don't want to be a part of it anymore. So when they're sharing their stories, you have to trust that they are bringing you the correct information, because it is the only information that we have to go on, right? And so there have been, you have all these the sciences, they're basically federal, they are funded by the federal government. And you have all these universities that rely on funding, and they rely on having their work published. So you have all these entities that are they need to be recognized for what they're doing, and the people that are funding them are usually have an agenda, like a certain governmental policy, or they need data that supports that policy, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Or the practices. Yeah. So if you're a university and you are asked to do this research, and they say, we will fund you completely, but we need this data to support our product. And they know that if they cannot give them that, if they cannot meet those commitments, then they will not get funding again. And the only way they can actually build their laboratory, expand on it, and buy new products. And anyone who's worked in a lab, looking into an old microscope sucks. Like, there's a lot of equipment that constantly need to be renewed, analyzers, right. And it's expensive. And if they don't get these fundings, they basically don't really have a functional lab. And so just from whistleblowers, you hear stories of how they were actually involved in falsifying their own research to accommodate.
I mean, it's a tricky subject because you've also got, you would think that academia would be the referee between all this, or the one that could sort of separate the financial profits from, financial corruption from the truth and so on. But what I discovered is that a lot of academia, like Harvard Medical School and places like that, their trials and so on are being directly financed by Big Pharma. So then you've got a problem there. And then, so on one level, and I think people who are new at getting in this, they go, oh, well, it's black and white. You've got financial profits, you've got it on the record that a lot of politicians are receiving money from Big Pharma, all that. But then I think the deeper you go, it gets more complicated, because a lot of the alternative health people are putting out a shitload of quasi science, which laymen like myself fall for all the time, and then you have to go back, and that's why I think it's important for people to liaise with real scientists like you and it's important for scientists who are concerned to speak out, because I think you've got so many people in this era where everyone can have a blog and so on. You've got so many people who aren't qualified to comment on all this stuff actually giving detailed reports. But I think those people are important in a way, because sometimes it starts with those sort of people, and I think there's been a groundswell of concern about stuff, but there's been a lot of misinformation in there too. And that's the other, there's hysteria that builds as well,
Right. What's really difficult is you have like the CDC, for instance.
Can you just clarify who they are again?
The Center for Disease Control.
Okay. Yeah.
They're not only are they in charge of vaccine safety, but they also promote vaccines. And it's very difficult to promote something that you also have to be in charge of its safety and then make money out of it. Like they're supposedly they sell about $4.6 billion of vaccines a year, and if they know that revenue is coming in and they're not producing safe vaccines, then they're not going to get them. Do you see what I mean? It's like a conflict of interest.
Yeah. But speaking to you, emailing you questions before and so on, I take it that you're basically in my camp, where you believe vaccines, the history of vaccines proves they're very effective. They have helped humanity overall, but there may be buried within that, there might be a more complicated narrative. But you don't fall for the hysteria that, every autistic child is related to vaccines and all that. And I think we're on the same page that nothing should really be spoken about until it's proven. But at the same time, somehow we should be able to get all the research. And one scary statistic I came up with is that, or I didn't come up with, I discovered, is that 50% of the medical research that Big Pharma does is actually never revealed to the public. And I came across that from a doctor here in Australia who told me that he as a doctor cannot get 50% of Big Pharma's research, which he finds scary, because if you can bury 50%, not just of medical research, but of any sort of research, it seems like you could tell the story you want. What do you think of that?
Right. Well, I don't know the percentage, to be honest, but okay. I know you have people like William Thompson. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I haven't.
He's one of those people that if you're interested in this subject, you should really look him up, and you should also look up a lady named Judy. I think it's Mikovich or Mikovic. So William Thompson, he actually worked in the immunization safety office at the CDC, and he admits to being a part of multiple fraudulent scientific research. And it took him about 13 years to sum up the courage and admit to what he was doing. that he said that he would destroy evidence, that he would hide facts, and the research paper that they did publish, he said that sometimes they changed some of the outcomes, and other times they completely just made them up. And he ended up saving some electronic copies, and he went out with them.
But to play the devil's advocate, Lisa, like I'm on your wavelength that there could be something fishy here with all that. But to play the devil's advocate, what about this? That let's say a corporation knows the end result, like they know for sure that maybe it's through other research or whatever that definitely this is the right thing to release to the public. It wouldn't be in their best interest to release anything unsafe. So could it be that my question is, do these sort of fudging of research, do they occur in other fields outside of vaccines? Like, I'm not talking about fraudulent stuff, but also an honest research. Is it sometimes just a way to speed up the research process and they know for sure that, hey, this is safe, this is good? Does that happen all the time in this field? I've got no idea. If it's common in research, then it's not really related to vaccines. Do you know what I mean?
Right. I think you can probably look up most things and find discrepancies.
Yeah.
I would say that, well, the educational system really teaches scientists to be extremely thorough. You don't take shortcuts. If you take shortcuts, you're not doing a good job. And so I would never expect a researcher to be doing a poor job. I would rather think that it would be that they didn't like their outcome, so they decided to be dishonest for whatever reason.
Right. But in the real world, like you're talking about the academic, that's the way you're trained, but in the real world, is there a financial incentive to try and speed things up? Is that because I'm just trying to I'm concerned about vaccines, but I'm also very confused. I listen to someone, an alternative health person, I go, shit, that's a problem. Wow. And then I listen to, at least 95% of mainstream scientists will say, no, they're okay, they're safe, and that's all hysteria. And then I'm totally, then I just go, oh, well, that's all crazy science. And then the next year I'll hear something that goes, wow, what are they saying now that this was removed because it was unsafe? I thought they said it was already safe. So, but I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here that, in the real world, is there outside, if we step away from vaccines for a minute, right? Mm-hmm. In all these research, do you think if we went deep enough, they are looking to speed things up by adjusting research? You know what I mean?
Speeding things up because they want to make the money or because they need the product out sooner?
Both.
Or both.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think that's just my opinion.
Because that would be my guess. That would be my guess that they're doing that in all fields, which would mean it could just be that Could it be that vaccines are everybody is studying them? Do you know what I mean? The research there. Whereas, what if we studied? I don't know. You could take anything at all, even cancer research, chemotherapy research. Are they adjusting their research there just as much?
What I have found with cancer research, it's not that they're adjusting their findings. I find it more there that their findings are not being published or not being talked about.
Okay.
There is a ton of cancer research out there that shows data of how poorly actually like chemo works.
Yeah.
But nobody pays attention to it. For some reason, it just does not get the attention that it deserves. So that, I haven't really seen that in the vaccination field. Vaccination field seems to be more directed towards let's not publish the bad data, or let's suppress it. Well,
Right.
with the cancer research, I've more noticed that it's more about, okay, the research's been published, but let's just not talk about it in the mainstream. Let's just let it sit there, and if somebody notices it, oh well, then it's
Right. So coming back to vaccines, I mean, it's a really difficult time to be a new parent. And I don't know if this is true, but somebody emailed me just before we came on, actually, and they're talking about how and again, I haven't fact checked this. You may know, but I haven't looked at it. But that in the United States, I think this isn't state by state, but federally, at the federal level at least, their vaccination schedule is 69 vaccines. Now, countries like Finland, Sweden, Iceland, I think theirs is 11 or 12 vaccines on their schedule. Now that's a radical difference. The other anomaly, and this is where we get into, they sort of present, within the US at least, I think they present science as that it's just one thing, but then when we go globally, there's contradictory research, as you would expect in a way, but sometimes quite radical contradictory research. For example, Japan recommends to stagger the vaccines and not so many under a certain age. So when they're under 6 months or 12 months or whatever it is, as infants, their scientists have said there can be a safety risk with that. So I've heard, and then I've heard other countries talking about how you need, similarly to Japan, that you need to stagger vaccines. So could it be that some parents report, and again, this is anecdotal evidence, which is messy, but quite a few parents have reported that they notice changes in their children after vaccines. And again, I don't want to be contributing to the quasi science and the hysteria if that's all what this is. But on another level, I think it's important to be asking it, because it seems like those with financial interests are not looking out for us. You know what I mean? So I guess to summarize all that, my question is, do you think there could be validity to any of the, mega conspiracies surrounding vaccines? And if so, how would it be possible when they are so extensively tested already? How would it be possible that we could be, even independent scientists working for the government who have got no financial interest, how could they be missing something that is possibly one of the most tested medical technologies in history?
Well, see, it all ties in together, doesn't it? Like, you have all these great doctors, you have all these great scientists that all want the good for the people, and they're reading all this published data and everything looks great. They have no reason to doubt it. And it's not until you start looking deeper into the politics of it all, when you realize that the data you're actually deriving these conclusions from may not be factual. And so in finding that balance of becoming too, what's the right word? Like, almost like too skeptical about anything you're hearing, and to actually knowing, like, okay, there is some truth, but there are also some much. You have to find a balance. And like, this was done in, I don't know, 20 years ago or so. It was in LA Times, like in the 90s, I think, where actually it started before then. What happened is we wanted to test this new measles vaccine. And so we took it to Africa and injected African babies with it.
Okay.
And they noticed that the babies that got the vaccination had a statistically higher rates of death. And they wanted to see if this would happen in American babies as well. So they went to the inner cities in LA where you have a high African American population. And they had 2 vaccines, and one of them was this experimental measles vaccine.
Wow.
But they didn't tell the parents.
What was the name of I think I've heard of this, but what was the name of the experiment? Or
Oh, I don't remember. I just remember the story.
Right. That's scary. Okay.
Probably Google it and find it.
Yeah.
It was in where CDC apologized was in LA Times, so you can probably Google that.
Okay.
But so what happened is they gave 1,500 Black infants vaccines. So there were
and they didn't tell their parents, did they?
No, they didn't tell anybody. That's what the news article was about, them apologizing for not telling the parents that one of the vaccines was that one
pretty charming
experimental vaccine. And so I think that was not the study. I'm mixing stuff. This actually happened, but there was another one, an MMR vaccine that I was thinking about. Anyways, in the study that I just told you, they noticed an increase in risk of autism was one of the findings of that study from that vaccine. That was the experimental vaccine.
Okay, so that was one example where autism actually did go up because of a vaccine.
Well, yeah, they said it increased the risk. So, you kind of have to look into the formulas, the calculations to see.
Yeah. I think also, like, anyone who's listening who's pro-vaccines is probably one of the problems I have with this whole debate is that people either lump you in pro-vaccines or anti-vaccine, and if you question, you're anti-vax. Whereas I think there's a third category which many people fall in, which is this would certainly be mine, which is confused, on the fence. But essentially, as in my case, also pro-vaccines, but wanting greater safety controls, and also wanting somehow does it feel like we need totally independent, what's the word, like those inspectors who come to your workplace to check if everything's safe. We need and they don't have a financial incentive to bring you down or lie about anything. It seems like we need somebody like that, but it's hard to know because the Big Pharma's pumping so many billions into government. Who would be the independent people with something like that?
Actually, let me see. I'm trying to think of their name. The CDC has a committee called the ACIP committee, for instance, and the FDA, they have their own committee that's called something else.
But there's rumors that those two, FDA and CDC, are pretty corrupt in themselves, or they've got, or they've at least got, how can you say it? They've got conflicts of interest, haven't they?
Well, see, here's the problem: is like the ACIP committee, for instance.
Yeah.
If you look at, like, if you go on the CDC website, you can see the conditions for being a member of that committee, and there's like absolute no tolerance of any kind of conflict of interest, so you have to resign. And then you get to the very bottom, and then they start talking about waivers for, like, how do they say it? Like, so if you have conflict of interest, you cannot be a member. But then they say that they have waivers that allows members to participate in their discussions. So I don't understand how you can have members without conflict of interest, but then also have waivers for members that have a conflict of interest. Because those members, they can engage in the discussions, but they're not allowed to vote, for instance.
Wow.
If that makes sense.
Okay.
But then they have external consultants that can come in that do have conflict of interest,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they're allowed to come in because of their expertise. They think they have something they can actually bring to the table.
So that's where you could still, yeah. Well, I mean, even if you have a totally, the only one I can think of is you have some sort of government that's, you've got a really good government that refuses to take any what donations from special interest groups before elections and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only way I can think of that you could independently test this. And I think we're getting into an area where this is the darker side of unregulated capitalism, where everything just becomes solely about money, and we get these issues where we can't actually get the total truths on things.
Right.
Mm,
Julie Gerberding or something like that. She was a director of the CDC. She was given, I guess she was given stock options, millions of dollars worth, and just
wow.
overnight she became a millionaire.
Okay.
And so when you see things like that, you have to wonder why that was necessary to, feed her all that money so fast when she's in that position, because she shouldn't be taking money that much. We're receiving that much money just for being a
No,
director.
no. I mean, one of the things that's interesting in the US also is you can run private business while in office, like the way George W. Bush had the company Halliburton. Whereas in
Mm-hmm.
many other countries, like here in Australia, you have to forego all your business once you take office, which seems a lot fairer thing. And I think that's not just presidents in the US, but it seems everyone is running a sideline business while they're working on supposed, you know, not for profit boards. And so I see a massive conflict there. And again, I'm a capitalist, but I believe uh, socialist, what would you call it, issues or socialist politics, I guess, needs to be infused with this to keep things honest. And that
Mm-hmm.
and I think it just seems within the US you've got like no universal health care. Insurance is another aspect where the insurance plays into the whole, if you call it the medical industrial complex, where you've got, the insurance issue is a big one where I mean, that's just as profitable as Big Pharma, I would guess.
Right.
Hmm.
I think a lot of these problems you'll only see in the States.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember in the, I think it was 1999 in India, they had this huge epidemic of Japanese encephalitis. And it was spreading so fast that they were actually didn't know what to do. So they gathered just regular and allopathic doctors and homeopaths and to talk about their options of how to treat these people, because their option was to import vaccines from China or Korea, but the process of doing that would take too long. So they actually looked at the homeopathic community to see what can you do to help us get rid of this Japanese encephalitis, because obviously now the modern medicine is not capable of doing that. So they actually ended up, they had 500 homeopathic clinics, and it was like 1,500 allopathic networks.
Just to clarify for anyone who's listening, that allopathic is Western medicine doctors, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And so they were able to, with homeopathic medicine, they were able to reach 20 million children. And this is all taking place in one state.
Okay.
Trying to think of what that.
I remember the study, you forwarded it to me, so it was like within a week, wasn't it? In one state.
It was in Andhra Pradesh. Is that how you say it?
I don't know.
So this was in 1999. In 2000, you had like only a quarter of the cases were gone. So you had I think you had only a quarter cases left of.
So,
the
so,
Japanese encephalitis.
so homeopathy cured 75% of 20 million people.
Right. So in
Wow.
2004, there was
Yeah.
actually no mortality from this, but
Mm.
the neighboring states that also were affected by this Japanese encephalitis, they actually did have mortality rates, but they did not do this homeopathic remedy. It was only in that one state. So because of this, the India government actually implemented the same strategy to be done in other states.
Wow. Okay. And so if a government, even if a state of America, let's say your state like Utah, if the state government there decided to do something like that, I wonder what would happen, because India is a faraway country. We view it as many Western nations would view it as, oh, that's their own thing, whatever. But if it was happening in the US in your own backyard there, and one state led by a shining example with, I'm not saying that homeopathy is the answer, but I just mean if they showed an alternative or complementary medicine that got a better result, I wonder what would happen, because there's a lot of that could affect a lot of income for many different fields, including even just within hospitals.
Right.
Mm.
It's, as you know, it's pretty much homeopathy is pretty much considered quackery.
Yeah.
And I've always subscribed to that myself because it never made sense to me.
It doesn't pass double blind or something. Is that right?
But
Yeah.
I've actually done. I looked into just studying more about the concept of healing at a molecular level. And I actually got into some pretty interesting research that talks about how, for instance, if that one little section that was about homeopathy and what I was reading, it was talked about how the reason it works is because you're stripping it off all the molecules and all you have left is energy. And to me, that was
gobbledygook.
It was interesting, but it didn't make any sense. So I started reading about energy and what the hell does that even mean?
Yeah.
And when I started reading about that, I actually realized that I need to start studying quantum physics, because it talks about, I don't even know how to it goes into your talks about healing at the level of your DNA instead of, it's kind of like healing from the inside and out rather than outside in, if that makes sense.
Well, an analogy would be the two oldest or two of the oldest medical systems on Earth, which are both older than Western medicine, are Chinese medicine and Indian medicine. So Ayurveda and traditional Chinese medicine. And so Ayurveda believes in prana, and the traditional Chinese medicine believes in qi. And those are integral to their medical systems. But once again, like homeopathy, Western medicine and Western scientists would call that quackery and just making things up, or they're hallucinating and so on. But I guess there could be things that we can't as yet find under the microscope, or we can't, whatever it may be, we just haven't found the ways to measure certain things, and they're yet to be discovered,
Well, actually, there are a couple of scientists that have studied this and found amazing things that you don't see publicly. You have to actually go look for the research. I mean, it's all published. You just have to look for it. And it talks about how you have I don't even know. I'm trying to figure out how to start it. You have your cells, your DNA, they're messengers. Not your DNA itself, because DNA is big.
Okay.
But so to start small, you have what happens is you have, you know how your DNA looks like, you know, like the double strands.
Yeah.
So what it is, you have your DNA and it's wrapped around histones, and histones are protein that are found in the nucleus. You have like 10 feet of DNA wrapped around that. And so you can imagine how tightly wound that is.
So what's the thing called that wraps around the histus? Is that right?
Histones.
Histones, okay. And that's those damn proteins again. Man, they're important things in our body.
Proteins are very important to your body.
Right.
And so it's important. What they found that one of the things they found on it is how tightly that DNA is wrapped around the histones. It makes a difference, and it can be manipulated as well.
Wow.
So you have nucleotide strands, and those strands, they have the base pairs. Have you ever seen like a molecular picture of the DNA?
Yes.
Like, so like how you have guanine and cytosine like hooked together, and you have adenine and thymine.
Oh, I didn't remember those names, but I've seen the
apple tree and chewing gum. Don't forget.
Okay.
That's how you know which ones go together. But
right.
Anyway, so in the center, in between them, so in between the guanine and cytosine, there's a hydrogen bond. And so in between the adenine and thymine is a hydrogen bond. So in the center of the DNA strand, you have hydrogen bonds that are holding it together.
Okay.
And so the DNA has all the information that you are made of, right?
Yeah.
Everything is in the DNA. And in order to retrieve that information out of the DNA, you have to split those hydrogen atoms. You have to open up the DNA, kind of like zip it up.
Okay.
You have, and those ends of the guanine and the cytosine and all this, they are made of benzene rings. Now you have to we're talking about chemistry.
That's all right. It's all good information. I'm writing some of this down for future reference.
So our benzene rings are like antennas.
Okay.
And it has electrons that around the atoms, but they're not fixed to the atoms. They move freely around the atom, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so you have okay, just let me think.
So you're going right down to the atomic level or molecular level, is that right, of the DNA? Okay.
Right.
So we started with the histones, then we went to the hydrogen bonds, and now we're at the benzene ring.
Yeah, your DNA is made out of rings.
Okay.
The rings in your DNA, those are your antennas.
Okay.
And those play a very
so
vital role.
They receive information, I assume.
Their communication is they communicate between your cells. That's what they're used for.
Okay.
I'm just talking extremely basic here. I'm skipping all the technical stuff. But if you ever want to read more about this, just read anything by Konstantin Meyl. He's the one who he researched Tesla. He actually wrote his PhD thesis on the vortex calculations and measurements, just to prove that Tesla's calculations were actually real, that they could be replicated. And it was through his research on that he came to all these conclusions. And this has all been tested and proven and redone by other people, other universities. And so it's not just...
Yeah. So Lisa, you mentioned something interesting there. You said that as they were studying that the DNA that is wrapped around the histones you said it's extremely tight. But you also mentioned there that the DNA can be manipulated. Now, if we can manipulate our DNA, is this getting into the subject of what's it called?
Epigenetics?
Yeah, because this is an area that fascinates me, because I believe when people say I've got a genetic disorder, I think that's valid, but oftentimes I wonder whether we can override that. And is that the? Can you explain what epigenetics is? Because this is something that I think many people could study, benefit from researching.
Yes. Let's see. So epigenetics is, you kind of, so your DNA structure, like your if you were to take like how I said, like the cytosine and guanine and all these, how like the code, how the DNA
Yeah.
structure is set up,
Yep.
that stays the same. The
Okay.
sequence, DNA sequence, but the molecular structure
Mm-hmm.
within the DNA, that changes, and it decides whether you turn on or off your transcription, which means it decides whether your DNA should be copied into RNA, and in order to
Okay.
multiply.
So
And so,
if you inherited a let's say a genetic defect surrounding the heart, if scientists know what they're doing in future, or even if individuals can somehow do this on a personal level through epigenetics, then could we turn off a negative code that would affect our health in a bad way?
yes,
Okay.
I think there's enough research out there that we could do things that you wouldn't even fathom right now.
Right.
This would be a pretty simple thing, I think, if actually they did enough mainstream research on it, they could easily get it done.
Wow. So is that? It sounds to me that that would be an area where you're getting into not necessarily immortality, but massive life extension. Because how many people die of things that were actually in their DNA rather than environmental issues or the way they've lived their life? How many people actually, you hear, oh, at 80 years old he just dropped dead of a heart attack, and then you find, oh, his father and his grandfather died around the same age from a heart thing.
Right.
It seems like at least 50% of people would die from something genetic. So if ever we furthered epigenetics, is that a way where that would be the point where we would start living a lot longer, do you think? Or is it more
Well,
complicated?
if you read the research done by Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Bearden, he
Yeah.
has he did research for the U.S. military,
Mm.
because it started way back when Russia got their scientists and America got their scientists, and the Russians were able to pick the scientists that were studying radiation and the underwater missiles. And I believe he was the one of the scientists who got hired here to figure out the technology so we could actually counteract the Russians and be ahead of them. He's got some pretty intense research and findings that have been replicated in lab, and according to he explains exactly how it works. So it's not just that he tells you exactly what it can do, but he'll go into detail on how it's done. And he talks about getting older without aging, and he
Mm-hmm.
talks about they can actually. He said that you can actually take the genetics of an egg fertilization and
Right.
alter it, and you can change the species in one generation, like completely. Like you can take a reptile, and you can air fill the bones, and you create feathers and wings, and it'll be a bird in one single jump.
So why can't
And
we extend the life of humans if we can do that?
well, because this is military research, I'm assuming,
Yeah.
because that's who we worked for. They used For their quantum potential that they used in their research, they used something called the Sheldrake's morphogenic field.
Okay.
And then you also need an inducing agent. In order to do that, they used a charged up Whittaker structure. And you have to have those two things in order to accomplish this. And because he talks about teleportation of energy, and it's just really interesting. And he talks about how you have this energy within the energy, really, that it's kind of invisible, and it actually goes faster.
So it's quantum sort of stuff.
It's right. So it's built like you have a Konstantin Meyl. That's just what I was talking about earlier in his research. He goes pretty deep into it as well. And then you add Thomas Bearden's research with that, and you realize that we already have the technology to do whatever the hell we want if we just use it.
Yeah, I mean, does this tie into, you sent me something about how you said here that some research has been published in multiple scientific journals, even peer-reviewed ones, and those experiments have been replicated, but are still not really a part of the mainstream. So if something's been replicated and reported in peer-reviewed scientific journals, what's the block to it getting into mainstream academia, say?
Well, the interesting thing is that Professor Meyl, he wanted to sell his technology to like Big Pharma. He didn't really want to take it anywhere on his own. He wanted it sold. Like he was actually talking about in one of his I don't remember if it was one of his papers or if it was in a presentation. I think it was a presentation in China that he was at. It was a Tesla presentation, I think. And he was talking about the Tesla car and how amazing it is, but everything about his Tesla except for the inside. And he talked about how it has like this battery, this really heavy battery that it's dependent on, and that it's expensive too. And so he started talking about free energy and how he actually has developed this that where you can actually drive the car where it's just drawing energy from the environment, and there is no other source except for the environment. So you just drive it. And he said that's what a real Tesla car is. And then he was at another meeting, I think it was in 2004, somewhere in the States, and somebody was interviewing him, and they asked which car company he would give this technology to, and he said he wouldn't give it to any of them because we need the competition. He said I would take this technology to GE or somebody like that. But that was like that was in 2011.
Okay.
But it's 2017 now, and I've
nothing's happened. Yeah.
Right.
But I mean,
so I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, but so when I put more mainstream, like you're a very open-minded mainstream scientist, but more people or the sort of scientists that trust everything that's being presented in mainstream media about science, those sort of people, whenever I put counter theories like Tesla and it could be free energy, or just that there could be certain cures for so-called incurable diseases, they say no, and their answer is always, science is simple. You just do an experiment, you put out your research paper, and if it's replicatable, then we'll listen. If not, it's not. But you're saying that apart from this Bearden guy, there's numerous others you've seen which have been published in mainstream scientific journals. They are peer-reviewed. The experiments have been replicated, but so what would be how would it be blocked? Who would do that to, or is it just the case that it's just ignored?
Right. It's not being blocked. And I'm exactly the person you're talking about. I'm that mainstream person who I want the facts in front of me, and all these homeopathy and all these things and all these conspiracies, that to me, my first thought is that it's all bullshit. So I have to actually kind of look at it and like, okay, if I'm going to want facts, I want to see if there's anything to what I'm reading here. And that's how I got into reading about Professor Meyl first, and then Bearden after that. And in what happened, have you ever heard of Maxwell equation?
Heard of it, but know nothing about it.
Okay, so it talks about the forces in nature. Like, this is how you calculate wavelengths and the different forces.
Yeah.
This is my that was my level of quantum physics for you. So what it is he has so have you heard of the electromagnetic wave and magnetics? Have you heard of scalar waves?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what that was all about. And
okay,
I'm trying to think.
And that was something that was replicatable, was it?
Well, that's the problem. So when Professor Meyl started working on proving Tesla, he found that you have an expanding vortex, and which is in the calculation, it has a value. And then he had the contracting vortex, he had it set at 0. Maxwell did in his equation. And he just couldn't work with it. And then if you look at history, when Maxwell wrote that equation, if I remember correctly, he knew it was wrong. He knew that the contracting vortex, which is a potential vortex, is not 0. And so whoever is on the board of decision making when it comes to publishing formulas, they said, we're not changing that. That's 0. We need to keep it at 0.
That's right. I remember hearing the story. Yeah.
And then that's where you have conspiracy theories coming and say they did that on purpose because this equation is used in all school books and all universities, and every single engineer that graduates is going to come out with this formula, and we do not want them to know how to create everything we know is possible. Basically, they want to limit to the knowledge of the general public. But that's that's
a mega conspiracy.
Yeah. Right. So anyway, so you have the contracting vortex is 0, but Meyl figured like you have to have an opposition in all things. Like you have matter and you have antimatter. On when you have a battery, you have positive. You always have an opposite. And so he explained, like, you have a tornado. If you're going to make a tornado, you need a storm. On the outside, you need a contracting force, and on the inside, you need an expanding force. Without one, you cannot have a tornado without the other, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because those two forces together is what actually creates the structure of the tornado.
Right.
And so he published that in 1990, this whole paper on this whole thing. And it was just pretty interesting if you ever want to read it, because he talks about how our cells use this system as well, our nerves, and how we communicate between our bodies and externally. Anyway, so he published this in 1990, and then he was going to republish in 94, and he was and his paper was rejected because they said that if you are right, that means that magnetic monopoles exist. And he couldn't prove it, so he his paper was basically rejected. But there was a German company. I'm trying to think of the name of it. It's I think it's the biggest
Big Pharma?
scientific.
Oh, okay.
No, it's I don't think I remember it. It's one of it's the biggest science research company in Germany. If I remember it, I'll shout it out. I think it was like in 2003, they were actually able to produce or discover the magnetic monopoles. So now when they discovered that, that was considered like the discovery of the century, even though he had discovered in 1990, all of a
decade
sudden
before.
now,
Wow.
right, all of a sudden now it was this huge thing. And so, but because of that, his discovery was actually accepted.
Okay, so there's an example, but also I would also counter certain scientists who say, well, you've just got to do the experiments and then show us and we see if it's can be replicated or not. But the other thing is how we were talking about before, or I think I was talking about, how there's global science as well, and it doesn't always gel. It's not always in sync. And so you do, and within each let's say within each medical system, so Western medicine, and then you've got your Ayurveda and traditional Chinese and so on. You've got it's almost like there's a belief structure within that, and there's assumptions made. So within Western medicine, if we put forward, let's say I was a scientist with you, and we put forward, well, we want to do extensive testing on the chi of the body. They will go, well, the what? What are you talking about? Never heard of this. What's that? And there's no way they're going to fund us. So there are some things that people want to test for and prove, but they actually can't get the financing for that.
But that actually both Professor Meyl and Lieutenant Bearden have shown it possible. What they do is they measure the aura of the person.
Right.
And they talk about they talk about what the aura actually is and how it can be measured and what it is that causes the aura to change.
Yeah, but Bearden was in military science. So would he have got that finance outside of that, within, say, if he said, I want to test for this for Western medicine or something, would he get the financing?
I don't know. He's retired now. I don't think he's doing anything right now.
Sure.
But like if you look at all of Professor Meyl's research even on the aura, it's all published. It's all there in journals on the internet.
Okay.
So, and he has multiple ones. There's a ton of interviews on YouTube, and it's quite interesting. There's this guy, Swedish guy, that keeps interviewing him. His name is Henning Witte. He has his own YouTube channel called The White TV, and he's extremely into conspiracies.
Okay.
And he found Professor Meyl because he this is him telling his own story. Is he said that there was this ferry accident in Sweden, and he believed that this accident wasn't really an accident, that there was actually something else more to it. And so he was helping the families of the victims to catch whoever was responsible. And he said that the Swedish Secret Service and the US Secret Service forced him to stop his research into it. So he was unable to help the families. And he said none of the mainstream media was willing to talk about it in Sweden. So he promised himself that he was going to start his own TV channel, and having it on the internet ended up being the cheapest way for him to do that. So he started White TV.
Okay.
And this lady had approached him and asked him to please start research into mind control. And he hadn't really thought about it until then. And he was instantly interested just because he says that he has a family member who was a victim of mind control. And so when he started looking into the research, he started looking into the quantum physics, and he found Professor Meyl in his research, because all of this quantum level interaction of information in our body talks about, it explains how you can communicate or affect something from a distance. And so does Bearden's research. It's exactly the same thing. They just kind of have a different language. But if you watch the videos, he speaks good English, but the sentences aren't always clear. Especially when you're talking about something like that, it's kind of hard to understand. But if you read his papers, you get more of the context.
Right. Okay. Another thing I want to ask you about is, have you heard that there's a body of research, a body of evidence to suggest that our cells can benefit from fasting? Do you know anything about that?
Yes. You want to hear?
Yeah.
Well, so
go ahead. Sure.
People are, I don't know if you heard, but there's a lot of people that do intermittent fasting now. It seems like
That's
a
the
big
fad, isn't
fad
it?
almost.
Yeah. Is that beneficial or not?
Well, they say it is, because you're constantly feeding your cells stuff, like you're soaking them with sugar or whatever, and you need to give them a break from your from working. You need to allow them to take care of their own waste.
That makes sense, doesn't it? Just from a personal level, you can feel your body. You know, you've just eaten 3 hours ago. Now here's another big meal. You know.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's basically all it is. It's protein waste. And it's called autophagy. It's just the cell needs that time to heal and repair itself. And the problem is, in a lot of the research with, like, it says that it burns fat and your insulin levels drop.
Yeah.
And
I
all these things.
I know quite a few bodybuilders are doing intermittent fasting as well.
Right.
Yeah.
But all the things, like, they're probably all right, all the research into it, but most of it is done in mice. So it's not like this being tested in humans.
So what's your opinion on, so you've got a negative opinion on testing on animals? You don't think it relates to humans?
Well, I think it can. The only problem is that their cells are different than ours. Their systems are different than ours. So what works in a rat or in a mouse doesn't necessarily function the same way in a human.
Right. So
that's where it kind of gets tricky.
Because they're always announcing something like, "Oh, this rat has been shown to we've cured paralysis in this rat. It won't be long now until humans, and then 10 years later, there's still just as many paraplegics and quadriplegics and so on." You know?
Right.
Yeah. So.
Sorry,
I got off track there on animal testing. So back on fasting, yeah.
Yeah, no, so, like, when they say that your insulin levels drop or your human growth hormone increases, I mean, I think it's all true, even though it is done in animal testing. I do think that just my personal opinion, and not based on anything else, is that I believe it is good for you. And
yeah, it makes sense.
Even if it doesn't do all these little things in your body, at least it is repairing itself, and you have to allow your body to do that.
Right.
And the only way to find out if it works for you is just to do it.
That's the same with when people are building muscle. You need those days off to repair the cell.
Right.
It grows from there, you see. So maybe there's something similar. I mean, I know they do something like you start at. Let me think about this. You start eating at. No, you stop eating at 8 p.m., which is fairly easy because you have dinner, and then you don't eat until 2 p.m. the next day. That's what some people are doing.
Right. So, there are different
cycles
patterns of intermittent fasting. People do it differently. There are people that say intermittent fasting is really that you eat, like, you eat for 12-hour window, and then you
Okay.
fast the other 12. And
But
some people say that you should eat in a 10-hour window and fast in a 14-hour window.
okay.
And they say for bodybuilding, I believe they said the best thing to build that muscle was if you eat for 8 hours and fast the rest. But I
Yeah.
don't know if that's true, because I'm not into building muscle, so I haven't really tried that.
Mm. I mean, when you're sleeping, because the term break fast. You ever
Hmm.
thought of that? I'd never,
Yeah,
I've never thought
breaking
of it.
the fast.
Breaking the
But
fast. So,
I think that's only in English that they use that word.
all right, but still, so you're breaking the fast. So while you're sleeping, they say that your body repairs itself most during sleep and rejuvenates
Hmm.
and so on. So
Right.
what are your cells and does your microbiology and so on, does that behave differently when you are asleep? Do you know?
Well, when you're sleeping, if you think about the difference in your energy level when you're sleeping and when you're awake, because every action that you do, the cells need energy to perform it, right?
Yeah.
Even lifting your finger, you're using energy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So every action that you perform is powered by energy. And so when you're sleeping, the cells, they can utilize that energy for other purposes. And that's
Right.
why, like, for instance, when you're sick, your body is aching, and because it's drawing all the energy that you normally use for being a vibrant human being. It's taking all that energy and utilizing it, taking that energy and transferring it over to your immune system that needs that energy to fight. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
just a transference of energy level. And that's why you do a lot of things when you sleep that you don't do when you're awake within your body on the microbial level.
Mm-hmm. Did you have anything else you wanted to add? Was there any other subjects you thought tied into perhaps vaccines, cancer, anything we've discussed?
I don't know. Um,
Macrophages.
you
I
like those,
mean,
huh?
I've learned a lot, and I hope people listening will as well.
Actually, there's one research that came out that I didn't share with you.
Okay.
It actually started with a Japanese doctor, Yamamoto. He discovered something called GCMAF in our bodies, and he also discovered that there is I think he discovered it. Maybe I'm lying. I don't know. That cancers and viruses, they create something called nagalase. Um, and he did some research on that, which was extremely great and seemed to be revolutionary. But then actually more research was done, and they found out that he was actually not right completely. But the GCMAF, I don't know how much detail you want me to go into what it actually is,
Go for
but
it.
your body does not, it creates it. It's a Okay, it ties in with your macrophages. That's why I
Okay.
was mentioning it. So, okay, where to start? So you have this protein, and proteins are made up of amino acids.
Right.
You have
Yeah.
this vitamin D binding protein, and it's made up of 450 amino acids.
Mm-hmm.
And in on acid number 420, it's called threonine probably, and it has three sugars attached. And at this level, this is where Dr. Yamamoto's research kind of was unreproducible, because they realized that the sugars attached to that molecule on the 420th position were not correct in his research. So they did another research, and there is this sugar, I guess, and it's called chondroitin sulfate. And
Chondroitin sulfate. Okay.
yeah, and it helps activate this GCMAF. GCMAF it's a combination of that vitamin D, and it's the MAF is macrophage activating factor. And so this combined actually is what supercharges the macrophage. If you will say that the macrophage is, let's say it's a lazy bum cell, it's just kind of half asleep all day long, and that's how it's fighting the immune system. This GCMAF molecule, it will supercharge the macrophage and make sure that it's working at like the utmost potential all the time.
Okay.
And they did they actually in nagalase in like viruses and in cancer cells actually is inhibits that. It makes it so the GCMAF does not reach the macrophage. And so so the theory was like, if you measure the nagalase level in your body, you'll know if you have cancer or a virus going on. And if that's the case, then you know that it's probably blocking the GCMF from activating your macrophages.
Oh, okay.
But they also did a research with this on autistic kids, and they actually found out that if you put kids on GCMAF therapy, it's like chondroitin sulfate therapy, really. Well, there's this one study in 2012, they had 40 autistic kids, and all of the 40 had the elevated nagalase in them.
So their GCMAF was being blocked, is that right? Because of that?
Well, nagalase has a way to inactivate the GCMAF.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if they did the detail in that study necessarily about that, but they were just testing the levels of the nagalase because they know it's not a good thing to have there. So what they did is they injected, that was the findings of Yamamoto, by the way, that the nagalase inactivated the GCMAF.
Oh, okay.
But so they injected all these 40 autistic kids with GCMAF, and after doing that for 14 weeks, they all had the decreased level of the nagalase, and they noticed that it also alleviated the symptoms, the autistic symptoms. They actually became better. And they were asked to find a way to create GCMAF out of the body to make it so it's not a molecule, a human blood molecule, but an actual molecule from the outside environment. And they did. And they called it
chondroitin sulfate?
No, that's from your body.
Oh, that's from your body. Okay. So there's a pharmaceutical equivalent, is there?
Well, they found one that they called rerum, and it's Latin for of things. And the name was actually inspired by a poet 2,000 years ago. His name was Titus Lucretus, something like that. And it was he said de rerum natura. It's about the nature of things, because they found this. It's made in nature. It's a natural product. They didn't actually
occur.
They didn't invent it. They just found it.
All right. Okay.
And so they so what they found is that it was able to. There's this. It's called TGF beta 1. It's something that all the bodies have. It's like a growth factor, I think. And autistic children had a very low level of this.
Okay.
So they injected them with this rerum, and they noticed that after 5 weeks or so that the TGF beta 1 levels, they were up to normal. And so they were actually
functioning better?
Well, much better.
Right.
And then they wanted to make sure, they said, like, this is not like a miracle cure, because if you just take this, nothing is going to happen. You have to have a good diet
Oh,
with it.
okay. Okay.
So they said that the best diet to do with this would be a ketogenic diet, like a low carb diet. So high in fats and amino acids. And so they say if you can do that, if you can do the nutrition and take the rerun, you can almost get rid of the autistic symptoms.
Sounds like rerun would be good for other health conditions besides that, maybe.
It could be. I mean, this was just one research paper. There may be others.
Yeah.
So you never know. Then that's the scary part about reading research, because I'll read a paper and I'm like, this is fantastic. And then I'll think this is like revolutionary. And then I'll read something later that disproved the whole damn thing. And so it is. And I'm like, ugh.
So a lot of it is really temporary. It's at the stage we are now. We can test. But it's not not many studies are actually totally completed. It seems like it's phase 1 and so on.
Well, it's why this is why it's so important that your findings are reproducible.
Right.
When you write your research paper, you have to write it in such steps that somebody else can pick it up and do the exact same thing. And if they can't, then you can't really claim that your findings are correct and that this actually works. Because if it doesn't work for anybody else, then maybe you did something wrong. Does that make sense? So reproducibility is extremely important.
That's the whole basis of science in a way, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, well, we've covered a hell of a lot of subjects, and I think there's good information in there for people, everything from, doing further research on vaccines, but also personal health stuff in there too. So you've shared a lot, and I think it's really important that scientists like yourself speak their truth and share what they've observed and so on. Even if sometimes those are uncomfortable truths, or you could be ridiculed by other scientists at times. Still, the greater thing is, well, what's best for society with all that? And I think that relates to, society should also always be first in a greater sense as well, and ahead of monetary concerns as well.
Right.
Okay, well, and I just started to think of more and more, even getting into subjects like, we'll cover it maybe another time, but subjects like, I just remembered now what the Nazi science, what they, in terms of their human experimentation of medical experiments. And then you've got, people can research this separately, but they've even what the Japanese did, and there was a doctor called, with the Nazis, there was the big one, Dr. Mengele, but then in the Japanese had an equivalent of Auschwitz with all their medical experiments, and there was a doctor there called Dr. Ishii, and those are two that we could have tied that in, but it's kind of a separate subject. But it's just fascinating, the body of research out there that's kind of underreported, and then you touched on it also with military research as well, which is similar to the way Big Pharma throws away 50% of their research or doesn't publish 50%. Well, we've got a situation now where with the military, 50% of everything they do is actually classified, so we don't know and that includes not all of that is scientific experiments, but there is some serious scientific research going on that even the average mainstream scientist has no way of knowing about.
Right. You know what I mean? He made an interesting comment. Bearden did. He said that the Soviets have been inducing diseases in people in the U.S. Embassy in Moscow since the late 1940s.
Not a good place to work.
No, I don't. So I mean, I have obviously not looked into it. I don't even know if this is something that's been reported.
Right.
But that's something that I guess the Soviets are working on, is how to induce diseases from a distance. And there was actually, and I don't know if you may remember this, it was in Britain at some point, there was a guy who graduated in mathematics, and his cranial cavity was actually filled with 95% fluid. He had 5% brain matter, which was in the tip
Oh,
of
that's
his
right.
brain.
Yeah. That's fascinating, isn't it? You get those people that are almost brain dead, or they've got no gray matter left, and they're doing amazing things, and you're going, wow.
Right.
Yeah,
And so that's where these quantum physics theories are so great, is because they explain all of it. They explain why this can happen, what do we need the structure for, and what is in the structures and what is not in the structures, and it's just really interesting. So you should read it.
Sure. No, I've written a lot of notes for things to research further, and I think you've shared some awesome information, Lisa. Thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Great job. Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.